you doing? Justin here. Today we are going to be chatting about unison bends, which is one of my favorite little techniques, as it makes things very powerful, can sound a bit gnarly, a bit aggressive. It's a really cool idea. Basically, we're getting two of the same pitch. We play one static note, and then we play another note which starts a tone lower, but bends up to the same note. And you can hear it starts kind of, it's already quite gnarly, but so as it's getting up to that pitch, it goes through a period where it's very dissonant. The two notes are really fighting. Very aggressive sounding little idea that. It's very, very cool. Very, very common in kind of blues rock, but in traditional blues as well. It's quite a common little idea. And it's good for your bending practice as well, because you're having to bend one note so it's exactly the same pitch as another one. So that's kind of a good thing to practice. It trains your fingers up how far they have to bend to get it. Before we get to a close-up and look at exactly the kind of the mechanics of doing this particular thing, one thing that I really wanted to mention first of all, if you've got a floating tremolo bar, like a whammy bar or whatever, so one that moves up and down, when you do a unison bend, when you bend a string, every time you've got a floating whammy system, as soon as you bend a note, the whammy is going to lift up a little bit, and then that means the fretted note will go a little bit out of tune, a little bit flat. So if you're really clever, you can try bending the note, the static note, the one that's not bent, bending that just a little bit to compensate. I don't have operational whammy bars on any of my guitars. Well, I've got it on a couple of guitars, but I don't play them very often. I tighten the springs in the back of the guitar, right? I screw those screws up and I angle the springs so it's very tight, so that it just doesn't move really, you know. Just not into the whammy bar thing. I've got a couple of guitars when I attempt to badly play Jeff Beck songs with the whammy bar, but generally I don't use it as a thing. So if you've got a whammy bar like a floating tremolo, like a Floyd Rose, you might find this a little bit difficult. There are a couple of inventions that might help stop it, but I've never found them to be effective from myself. So but they're definitely worth exploring if you're into the whammy bar thing a lot and you still want to do unison bends, and it doesn't stop, you know, incredible guitar players like Guthrie Govan from tearing up unison bends all over the place with a floating tremolo. So there's definitely a way around it. It's just not something that I know much about, to be completely honest. So anyway, enough of me apologizing for myself. Let's get to a close-up and see how to do a unison bend. Hey, they sound wicked. I love unison bends. So what's going on here? So let's start off down here at the 5th fret in kind of box 1, because everybody feels happy in box 1, right? So let's start with the first finger in the 5th fret of the 2nd string. Okay, that's the note E. And then we're putting the 3rd finger down in the 7th fret of the 3rd string, the note D. Okay, if you play those two together, they already sound pretty dissonant. Okay? Now the trick here with unison bends is to make sure that you use the same pivoting action that you do use for normal string bends, but you've got your first finger as part of the pivot itself. Okay, so normally you're thinking like the whole hand, and the pivot point is where the first finger reaches the fingerboard. Okay, but now what you're trying to do, you put your first finger down and try and get that same feeling, but keep the tip of your first finger where it should be, which is the 5th fret, without bending. That string might move a little bit, just doesn't want to move too much. Okay, ideally it shouldn't move at all, to be honest, but you know, to start off with, don't be too hard on yourself while you figure out the technique, while you figure out the mechanics. Okay, so once you feel good with that and you can move your fingers in that kind of motion, you feel like it's your forearm doing the pushing, then put your 3rd finger down on the 7th fret of the 3rd string and see if you can push it up. The pressure is coming from kind of where the little finger is. Okay, and again, should be the same note. The bent note and the first finger should be more or less the same. Now some of the beauty in this for me is getting there. Okay, it doesn't want to be exactly in tune, or it's kind of, you're missing the point. That's where I like it, where they're kind of fighting with each other a bit. Going exactly to the unison sounds less cool to my ears, but it's up to you what you want to go for. So that's the first step, is just getting used to the mechanics. Okay, see if you can do a bit of bend and vibrato. Sounds very cool as well, doesn't it? It's a very, very interesting little effect, this. I really like it. The guys like Jimi Hendrix used to use this really, really well. Now, but because of the way we're doing it, that it's holding the first finger down on the third finger, we're nearly always moving position when we're playing this, like moving to different patterns. So in the key of A, we might do this. The next note on this string is here. There, so we'd move the whole shape. The next note in pattern 2 will be there on the 10th fret. So we go 5th, 8th. I'm talking about where the first finger is in case you missed that. Then 10th. The next note, pattern 3. Now notice here is a good example. On this note here, C, where our third finger is going down is the note A sharp, which is a terrible note to play in the key of A, okay? Unless you want to play like really outside John Scofield stuff. That's a bad note. But because you're just moving, you're just concerned about the note that you're bending to. Okay, that's a pretty big deal. It'd be important to realize that if I'm doing this, I'm just thinking about the note where that first finger is, okay, and I'm keeping that in the scale. What that requires is that you know your scale on that one string. So you know here, the A minor pentatonic on that string is 5th fret, 8th fret, 10th fret, 13th fret, 15th fret, and then to 17th fret. And I want to be able to see them within the patterns themselves. So that one, part of box 1, okay, that one, still part of box 1. But that one's also in box 2. So every time when I'm moving, I'm seeing where I am, what pattern I'm in. Usually to do with where the first finger is. So I think of this one as being here in box 1. This one in box 2. Here, box 3. Here, box 4. This one would be box 5. Okay, and then we'd be back up to box 1 again. So this idea works on the thinner string as well, but it's just a little bit more stretchy. So I would advise you start by getting this technique down with the first finger in the second string. When you move it onto the thinner string, of course the third finger is going to be up on the 8th fret of the second string. It's not hard, but just the mechanics of it can feel a little bit stickier if you've not got used to what they feel like they're on the second string. And of course, as soon as we're onto the thinner string, you now need to know your minor pentatonic scale on the thinner string, which you should anyway, as a matter of course, you should be studying that. This is such a great technique, you know, and a really good one for moving between different patterns as well. So if you hear, or whatever, you know, you can see that you can use it every time you want to get to another pattern. You know, you've got a vehicle to use. Sometimes if you're hearing the lick will force you into a new pattern, and therefore you've got to have some licks to use when you stop off at that new point. Another thing that I'd like to mention that I think is really, really cool fun is just exploring what it sounds like as it's coming down as it's going up. You know, you can hit it quite frantically. You can really get some pretty kind of gnarly sounds going on there. I like it quite high as well. You can hear it so aggressive and so dissonant. Kind of at the end of a solo, it can be so nice to bring out the big guns like that and create a bit of tension in what you're doing. To explore this technique to its fullest potential, you're going to have to know the notes in the scales all over the fingerboard, because it's not one that you generally tend to use in position. You can do if you just use it on 1 or 2 notes, but definitely moving around for a series is going to push you up and down the fingerboard, and that requires a really good knowledge of your different scale patterns and how they're connected together, which is something that you want to be working on developing anyway. My recommendation, get used to the technique first of all, and just using it a little bit to move between patterns that you're familiar with. You know, definitely keep your ear out for this one, because you're going to hear it very often. You know, if you like Jimi Hendrix, this was a big trick for Jimi Hendrix, and lots of other guys use it as well. So keep your ears peeled, see if you can hear where it is, and steal some specific licks that use this technique and try and incorporate some of those into your guitar playing. But it's a great fun one you can just explore on its own. It's almost like it's a word unto itself, and you can just spring it out whenever you want. It's always great. Personally, I really like it toward the end of solos, when you really want to make things a bit gnarly and the band's cooking behind you, and you want to pick it up a gear and kind of explode with it. You know, it's a great finisher, this kind of thing, you know. So as usual, there will be tabs and some additional help over on the website, so do go and check that out. Remember, it's a lot easier to follow through the course on the website than it is on YouTube, but I would really appreciate a subscription if you dig what I do. I'll see you for plenty more lessons very soon. You take care of yourselves. Bye bye.